I kiss the ground on which you walk. I kiss the lips through which you talk. I kiss the city of New York where I first met you. You're my darling, don't forget it, 'cause I'm the guy who will regret it. I love you more than when I said it, when I first met you.
I'm not across dating sites. I never have been. I've been well and truly off the market before such things as Tinder and eHarmony came onto the scene. But I have heard stories, I have heard stories about, people airbrushing and photoshopping their profile pictures and using pictures from their younger years when they were 5 stone lighter. So it's interesting, isn't it? The lengths we go to impress, and there has been, okay, and this, you're probably thinking, why am I starting here? But there has been a picture of Paddy Dow, and that's the player profile that I'm going to be concentrating on in this episode, Paddy Dow. There has been a particularly complimentary photograph of Paddy doing the rounds this week from a scratch match against the West Coast Eagles last weekend in the wet. And he's sort of unrecognisable. He's unrecognisable. He's buffed. He's got the short hair. He looks mean. He looks tough. He looks strong. At the end of the day, he's starting to look like a man. He's starting to look like a footballer, not a skinny sort of runt. Not that he ever was a skinny runt. He's always had the sort of big thighs. So you always could see the potential, but his upper body is starting to really develop. And when I looked at that, I thought, let's not get too, as much as it's like, you get really excited about seeing something like that, let's not get too caught up in it when you see a photo like that. The proof will be when we see Paddy again, hopefully this weekend. You can look at me, your bucks, but you've got to perform on the football field. I think the 20 years of age, that's where he is, that's where he's at. That, to me, is young, really young. And it's unfortunate that when someone is so young, they become maligned. And I think Paddy Dow has become one of our more maligned youngsters, which is disappointing. I can understand the frustration when you take someone with pick 3 and you think that they're not developing as quickly as you'd like them to develop. But the fact of the matter is he is 40 games into a very, very young career. And to be really scrutinising a youngster and sinking the boots in is probably unwarranted. Well, it is unwarranted. So let's do, what I like to do here is do a bit of a backstory. Just go back a little bit and paint a picture of the player, particularly these young players, a bit of a profile in regards to where they've come from, and then try and project what it may look like moving forward. So pick number 3 in the 2017 draft, the draft in which Sauce was looking for, once again, midfielders on the back of getting SPS and Fisher the year before, and 2015 obviously going big, with Harry and Weeders and Charlie and co. So he went with Paddy at pick 3 and Lockie O'Brien at pick 10. So there's a huge investment when you take 2 midfielders in the top 10 of the draft. Out of Swan Hill originally, so a country boy, through the Bendigo Pioneers TAC competition. Great Carlton, traditionally a great Carlton area. Lockie O'Brien through Bendigo as well. Brodie Kemp through Bendigo. I love it when I see players come through that region and play for Carlton. And then went to Geelong Grammar at the end of year 9. So school at year 9 in Swan Hill, and then left to boarding school on a football scholarship. So that's quite young to leave and go to boarding school, so it doesn't make much of a difference. But yeah, I mean, you leave home and highly rated junior, and went through all the programs, TAC, Vic Country, All Australian. So he was being looked at for such a long time. Let's have a look at that top 10 draft and the players taken in the top 10. And this paints a little bit of a picture of where Dow fits at the moment in the development. And it's just starting to take a little bit of shape, this draft. It's not, you wouldn't say it's like a wow draft, pardon the pun with Paddy, but it's starting to look like some really good footballers coming through. Cam Rayner at pick 1, he's played the 56 games for the Brisbane Lions. So he hasn't been what you would say, one of the better first round or number 1 draft picks. He's got a lot still left in him. Andrew Brayshaw, pick number 2, very, very mature and serviceable, solid type contributor so far for the Fremantle Dockers at pick 2, 48 games. Paddy at pick 3. Interestingly, Paddy Dow, his grandfather, Peter Dow, played 19 or 18 games for North Melbourne between 1959 and 1961. And the Kangaroos had pick 4 in that 2017 draft. So if we didn't take Dow, North Melbourne, who had pick 4, were definitely going to take him. And they ended up taking Luke Davies-Uniacke at pick 4, who's played the 23 games. He's probably been the most underwhelming player in the top 10, him and probably Lockie O'Brien at this stage. I think North Melbourne would be just a little bit disappointed with him, but he's still got a lot of upside left to go. Adam Chera at pick number 5 for the Fremantle Dockers has now racked up to 50 games. He's starting to really come along. Jaden Stevenson, pick 6, 48 games. We know, obviously, no Rising Star winner. And Hunter Clark at pick 7. He's a real find for the Saints. Down back, 39 games now. Nick Cofield, pick 8, has had an outstanding third season with the Saints thus far, playing in the back half, 27 games. Aaron Norton, who exploded out of the blocks, has just come back to the fore a little bit with some injuries, 45 games, a lot of upside though. And our own Lockie O'Brien at pick 10, 35 games. I might do a profile on Lockie O'Brien in the coming week. So you look at that and you sort of look at Paddy with his 40 games. Hasn't been able to get on the park this year because of injury. You're looking at that and thinking, and maybe he was gifted a few games early on in his career, considering where we're at. But you'd probably say for the same for Andrew Brayshaw and Davies-Uniacke and Shearer and Hunter Clark and Cofield, all coming through developing sides. They've probably all been gifted games at some stage. Just outside of that top 10, does anyone jump out who we could have taken? Still early days, but I suppose the two big ones, Tim Kelly, who the Cats took as a mature age recruit. He was always going to go home. So, you would have been well compensated for Tim Kelly. He's the one, and James Warple at pick 45. He's the one that really escaped from all clubs, except the Hawks, obviously, averaging 22 touches across his 42 games and 5 clearances. If you're projecting or redoing this draft, you're probably at Kelly at 1 and Warple at 2. But looking forward, I don't think he has some of the attributes that some of the others have, and maybe the upsides that the others don't have. But for us right now, James Warple would be bloody pretty handy. With Paddy as well, he signed a 3-year contract deal in 2018 in his first season. So he's committed to the club until the end of 2022. So he's signed, sealed and delivered thus far. And I don't think he should be concerned about, what he's got to offer this year and next year. And let's worry about his contract beyond that. Let's look at the breakdown. Knee injury this year, just for one game. Was he lucky to get that game in round 1? I reckon he was. I watched him very closely in the pre-season games. He wasn't outstanding, but he was fit. And he didn't finish last year off particularly well. This is what I said in my comments. It's great doing this because you can go back as a point of reference. It's what I said about his round 1 game against the Tigers, and you probably just forget it. It was pretty underwhelming. Missed 2 shots at crucial times, so he played forward, sort of half forward. who knows? Nail's one of those. His confidence grows. I highlighted the word confidence. I'll get to that in a minute. Found space inside forward 50, which was a small positive. To say he needs to do more is an understatement. I gave him 3 out of 10. He had 7 disposals, 2 tackles, which was okay, 2 tackles, because on that night we had 9 players who didn't lay a tackle against the Tigers in round 1, and he kicked a couple of behind. So he could have kicked a couple of goals from relatively easy opportunities, and that's been probably the story of his year last year. And I'll talk about his kicking shortly. So the breakdown of games across 2.5 seasons thus far: 20 games in his debut season, which was 2018. So we only missed the 2 games. And I love to go back to this trusty little football Bible here. He was managed in round 16. So he wasn't dropped, he was managed, so rested. And then he missed round 23 with a knee injury. And I thought he was relatively consistent in his first season without being, he never dropped under 10 touches. So it never went to single digit figures in his debut season from those 20 games. So he averaged the 14 disposals, and he showed some rare highlights for the footy club that year. The goal against the Gold Coast Suns, the run against Fremantle Dockers where I think he set up a goal for Matthew Wright. It may have been. And one bit of play which really excited me was against the Cats at Cardinia Park, where he smothered the ball in the middle of the ground, then followed up and fed the ball out to David Cunningham just before half-time, I think it was, and Cunningham kicked that really long goal. Those were some real highlights from that year. So he gave us some spark, quite a lot of midfield minutes in his debut season, averaged the 14.2 disposals. In 2019, so last year, 19 games, once again averaged the 14 disposals, but in his first 12 games under Brendan Bolton, he was averaging 18 touches. And then it dropped significantly to 9 touches under Teague, so went from midfield to forward. And then his confidence started to wane, so much so in the second part of the year under Teague. And I'll go to last year's Bible. Let's have a look at it. He was ill in round 18, so he missed that game. He was laid out. And last week I mentioned that Zach Fisher was ill in a game and was laid out, and that Fisher's one was a week after. So there must have been something going through the club. Then he came back and had a poor game in round 19. I think that may have been the win against Adelaide. And then was an emergency for round 20, so he didn't get back into the team. And so he got back into the team, but he was dropped. Then played VFL in round 21, and then forced his way back in for the last 2 games of the season. And he did actually when he came back. So he had that really poor period there last year where he just lost all confidence, playing as a sort of a forward. He did come back and play quite well against the Saints at the MCG, had 19 touches and kicked a nice goal. And then he finished the year okay in a really poor team performance against the Cats. He had the 13 against Geelong. So he had something to build on going into the pre-season, but his pre-season form was pretty poor this year, and just the one game thus far. And he's had that knee injury. After isolation, after when the season was finished, when the team was announced for the Melbourne game, he wasn't selected, and it was no surprise to me that he wasn't selected. I thought his performance in round 1 was poor, and it wasn't surprised that he was dropped. But then we found out the week that he was actually injured, and it's been a reoccurring knee injury that's kept him out through all that time. So talk of him not being able to get a game is well and truly off the mark. As far as playing goes, he's got a really nice balance of the game. From a positive point of view, he's got a really nice balance to the game. He can be a goal kicker as well. So he's kicked 14-19 from those 40 games. So that could be a lot better, but he can go forward and kick a goal. He has got quite nice forward craft, as I said in that round 1. He can find space inside forward 50. And his best possession game was against Port Adelaide in round 2 last year. He had 23 touches, but it was a really nice balance between contested and uncontested ball. So he had the 13 contested possessions and 11 uncontested possessions. And a couple of weeks later, he followed up with 22 against the Gold Coast Suns. And once again, it was 12 contested and 10 uncontested. So he's got that nice balance, okay, which not a lot of midfielders have. It's either one or the other. You're either inside or outside. He's got that nice balance, which was really good. And he can win the ball, okay. In that 23 touch game, he had 6 clearances. So he can get his hands on it at the stoppage. I think let's have a look at Paddy in regards to his strengths. And I think we all know his strengths and what he's brought to the table thus far. And these are the qualities, the attributes that he's had right the way through the under-18 competition. But these are the attributes we saw straight away in the first ever practice game we saw him play for the club against St Kilda, where he was just outstanding. And we were thinking, how come this kid wasn't the #1 draft pick at that stage? But his burst of speed, he's got power, he's got those he can move those hips. He's strong in the hips and the upper legs, but he is very, very powerful. He's good at the contested work, so he reads the ball particularly well off the hands from the ruckman. And he can go forward. He can go forward and kick a goal, and he likes to kick a goal as well. And I think the thing that impressed me, just looking at his latest vision, and I know you can get carried away with the scratch matches, the footage of 12 on 12, but the stoppage is pretty much the same, the amount of players around the ball. His ability to get the ball, and then also his hands, okay, his clear vision by hand. As much as he misses quite a few targets by foot, he doesn't really miss many targets by hand, and he's got really good vision. So that, to me, is a real strength. Does that fit into our game plan? Of course it would, but our game plan is basically based around kicking, which is an area of weakness. I'll get to that in a minute. To me, Paddy is he's a pure impact player. I don't know if he's ever going to be a really, really, really high possession player, as in we're talking, your sort of high 20s or even 30s. I think you'd be happy with Paddy Dow with your low 20s because he can do so much damage. He showed that with his goal against the Gold Coast and some of the other things he does. He stands out in that respect. So I think we lack impact players. And it's interesting, if you go back through some of the old interviews before he was drafted, there's one interview with Lockie O'Brien, who was a teammate, and Lockie said about him that he always stood up in the big moments at under-18 level, at school, for Fit Country. He loves the big moments. He loves them and steps up, which was a really interesting comment by Lockie O'Brien. Let's get to the weaknesses, and you don't need to be Einstein to know the weakness. And that is the kicking. Even in his draft notes from his under-18 years, the weakness was not so much his kicking overall, but it was more his kicking under pressure. In fact, it was an area of his game he did improve in regards to his kicking throughout the under-18 years. His kicking was quite good, and it didn't seem to be a huge problem. I don't remember, as a supporter group, really criticising his kicking in his first year at the football club. It was only last year that it really did deteriorate, which suggests to me hopefully it is a confidence thing. And look, it's a weakness because you can't have an all-round good sort of game and be good on the inside, but then sort of want to be damaging on the outside unless you are able to, hit targets. You're not always going to hit targets. I'm hoping it's a confidence thing. Now, the reason why I'm saying it could be a confidence thing is because, one, it did deteriorate and got worse and worse and worse as the year goes on last year. And a couple of other things as well. And I think this kid has been ridden pretty hard. I have heard from some really good sources that, and I want to be careful here, but I have heard that he's, come from a great family, but a family which have high expectations in regards to his football. And I reckon that plays on his mind a fair bit. So he'd be thinking about it a lot. And being a number 3 draft pick, that expectation just goes up to another level. And the worse it got last year, the more it started to affect him, the more he thought about it. And also, if you want to go back to episode number 8 of My Blue Heaven, way back in 2018, guys, when I first started this, I did a video called Second Year Blues. This is start of 2019, Second Year Blues. And I did a profile on Dow, O'Brien, De Conning, and so it's Feb the 3rd, 2019. And who was the other bloke we took into there? Angus Shoemaker. I did a little profile on each. And I went back and had a look at it this morning. And the thing that stuck out about me with Paddy was a couple of things that I observed in some scratch simulation. That's it, match simulation, not scratch. Match simulation at the start of 2019 when Brendan Bolton was still in charge and when Robert Walls was overseeing the whole sort of thing. But what I noticed in these match simulations was how hard Brendan Bolton and how critical Brendan Bolton was of Paddy Dow. I stood on that side of the ground a couple of times and he was yelling and screaming at Paddy constantly. And there was this one occasion that Dow was matched up against Sam Walsh. Now, Sam Walsh was a new arrival at the football club and they both went head to head in this match sim. And Bolton just berated Paddy Dow a couple of times. Walsh had the better of him, but it was about not adhering to structures and game plans and not following, Walsh around and getting lost in traffic. And it almost sort of said to me that was the start of a few concerns for me in regards to his confidence. Obviously, Bolton had confidence in him to give him big midfield times, but at the same time, he was riding him really hard. I reckon this kid he plays on instinct, plays on real instinct. And when you're a burst player and you've got power and speed and you're athletically gifted, which he is, I don't think you think about footy a lot. You don't think about it. I reckon he would have dominated at under 18 level. Then you come into a structure, with a game plan, which is just so, you've got to stand here, you've got to be there, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. You're spending a lot of time analysing. I think he's struggled. A little bit with that. I don't think he thinks a lot about the game in that sense. He just plays on instinct. And I reckon he lost his way last year, lost his way big time. He lost his confidence, and he's a kid that I suppose suffers from the high expectations. Well, that's what I'm hoping anyway from Paddy Dow. I think he's got huge upside. I don't expect too much from him when he comes back. That's the big thing. All right, he's missed a fair chunk of football so far. So don't expect that he's just come back into the team and he's just going to go spat straight away. All right, I think that's going to be unfair. But at the same time, this might be a perfect, with all those things I said about expectations, the outside external noise of people criticising him, that he's been a failed number 3 draft pick, he's thinking about his kicking, it's getting worse and worse and worse. This could be a perfect little window for him to come back into this team, away from Melbourne, away from the noise, away from the crowds, to build back his confidence. His body's a little bit bigger, it's a little bit stronger. So let's not expect too much from him, but at the same time, it could be a nice little window for him, because I think this is a kid who wants to do well, but has been listening to all this external noise, and it's got to him, and it's started to affect his confidence and the way he wants to play, which is playing on instinct. And I think he should be allowed to do that. to the betterment of our team. But he won't succeed in this football team if he can't kick. It's as simple as that. Our game plan is around kicking. There's one thing to tell a player just handball more, but we have a lot of inside mids. We have a lot. Cripps, Kennedy, Setterfield. We're stacked with inside mids. We need Paddy's explosion from the stoppage, and we need him to be using the ball pretty well going inside forward 50. And when he gets his opportunity, we need him to be using it in front of goal as well and making an impact on the scoreboard. I've always been genuinely excited about Paddy Dow. I don't think we should be hitting the panic button or the panic stations just yet in regards to kicking. I know there'll be a lot of you out there who will think, nah, he's no good. It's a failed pick. I don't think so. I think he's still got the capabilities, and it doesn't really. Who cares whether he's a true number 3 draft pick? But I still think, looking at that top 10, Rayner, Brayshaw, Davies, Uniacke, Chira, Stevenson, Hunter, Clark, Cofield, Norton, O'Brien. I mean, take Lockie out of that. I can't. If he can get his act together with his kicking, he could be every bit as good as any of those blokes in that top 10. So let's hold on to that. Okay, moving forward. All right, if you like these videos, you like these player profiles, I've hit the mark pretty much so far with my other 3 player profile videos over the last 6 weeks, Setterfield, Kennedy, and then Fisher last week. Please give us a like, please subscribe, please share, whatever you do. Appreciate all the comments from you guys down below. Sorry I don't get back to you guys on a more regular basis. But it is a busy time. If you want to check out my player ratings and comments from each round, please go to either my Twitter page or my Facebook page, the My Blue Heaven Twitter page or the My Blue Heaven Facebook page. Big game against the Dockers this weekend. And if it makes it interesting, doesn't it? If Paddy does come in, and we are expecting he might. We've got a couple of players out. Jack Martin's going out. All the hype now, all the talk's been around Andrew Brayshaw and Adam Chira for the Dockers, and maybe we should have taken Chira. All right, so it's a nice little opportunity for Paddy to come in and just show us what he's got. See you later.